Paul Sheridan here from the Construction Industry Federation. I'm Director of Main Contracting, and the focus of this video series is on the CIF's Design Risk and Building Control Regulations Practice Note, which is available on the CIF website under the Contracting Resource Hub. Our industry is becoming more complex. Technology is having a major disruption on the industry. And what it's leading to is a change in the traditional design capability and capacity of design teams and consultants. And there's an increasing reliance then on contractors to take on design responsibility, which involves then taking on more risk. But when you take on design responsibility, it also has an impact on your interaction then with the building control system. And it's important that contractors understand this. And that is why the CIF have developed the CIF's practice note on design risk and building control regulations. And as part of that, we've also designed a template design matrix, which contractors may also find useful when they're tendering for work involving the taking on of design responsibility. And all of this is available on our Contractors Resource Hub on the CIF website. So this video that we're doing today is very much looking at this practice note, and in particularly we're looking at design itself and responsibility for it, but also how to deal with incomplete design, ambiguities and omissions and inconsistencies within the design package, particularly when there's lack of clarity in the contract itself in terms of design information. And also then the practice note looks at the difference between your statutory obligations and your obligations under your commercial contractual arrangements. But what I want to do is to focus on a number of factors that the practice note covers. And the first one is really probably self-evident as truism, is that if you're being asked to take on design, it should be very clear within the contractual documents. You should be able to identify the works items that are being transferred so that you can understand the risk involved and price it. And we'll come to that again in the next series of videos that will follow this, and we'll be looking at the bill of quantities, particularly the new ARM 5, which deals with specific issues related to contractor design development. The second point is understanding the difference between primary design, normally carried out by the design team, and secondary design, which would normally be carried out by the contractor. And primary design is very much about the design of the building itself, the integration of the systems, the integration of the certain parts of the building and how they work together and integrate together. Whereas secondary design, as I said, is normally carried out by a contractor, would involve workshop drawings and development of design fixings and so forth in accordance with the primary design. And it's important to ensure that you understand that, because that does affect who is responsible for the integration of the systems. So who's responsible for the integration of a lift shaft with the building itself, or with facades or glazing or cladding systems or mullions and steel framework. It's very important to understand that. And I suppose you really need to be clear when you're looking at your tender documents. Put the time in to assess who is going to be taking responsibility for those things, because it's ultimately the contract that will determine that. And that could ultimately then have an impact on the type of ancillary service that you may have to provide. And we'll be dealing with that in another video on this particular area. The other thing to be aware of is performance specifications. Performance specifications are the responsibility of the design team, particularly in a traditional employer design contract. The responsibility of the contractor is to find a solution or build a solution that complies with those performance specifications. It's important to know. The other aspect, and this is really important, is design liability. Contractors and specialists should ensure that their design liability is limited to the same level as that of the design team and the consultants, i.e. reasonable skill and care for the element of work that you have taken responsibility to design and that you're competent to do so. That's very important, particularly for your professional indemnity insurance. And if you are taking on design liability halfway through a contract that was unbeknownst to you at the start, you need to be very careful, because it could have a negative implication for your PI insurance, which you need to check with your broker. The other thing then comes down to incomplete design. And this is something that is becoming more and more prevalent. And contractors should be able to rely on the commencement notice to help them understand what has been left to design, because the statutory requirements with the commencement notice is to list the items that are incomplete for design. That is a statutory requirement, and it's set out in the Code of Practice, Section 5. Another element that's really important, particularly as we see more and more of the concept of selected subcontractors. whereby a contractor is taking responsibility for a subcontractor or specialist after the contract has been awarded, particularly when they're being asked to take on design responsibility for them as well as performance. They should really ensure that they limit their responsibility for prior design. Any design, any advice, any information that's developed prior to the award of that contract, that appointment, is the responsibility of the design team, and it shouldn't be taken on by the contractor. And the final matter on this issue that I'd like to discuss is these catch-all phrases that are coming in. And they're related to this idea of lack of clarity around who is responsible for the integration of systems. We have seen catchphrases whereby the contractor is liable for all gaps between the specialist design and the design team's design. Contractors should avoid catchphrases like that. The design responsibility and who's responsible for coordination and integration should be set clearly out in the contract so they can be measured and priced accordingly. Again, all of this information is contained in our practice note, which again is available on the CIF website under the Contracting Resource Hub for members only.